Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. There are at least 3 different levels at which defilements can occur. At the most obvious or superficial level, they would manifest in speech and action. We do something unskillful. But before that, there has to be an arising in the mind of some unwholesome state or tendency. And at the deepest level, there are the anusaya, which are called the latent tendencies, or the underlying tendencies in English. The anusaya are the latent possibility of some corruption in the mind, like the seed, and they're present in everyone who's not fully awakened. Everyone who's not an arahant has some degree of the anusaya. There's a list of 3 and there's a list of 7. The 3 anusaya are the tendency to sensual desire, the tendency to ill will, and the tendency to ignorance. So that's synonymous with the 3 roots, lobha, moha, dosa, the 3 roots. So that is really the primary list, but then it's expanded sometimes to a list of 7, and to desire, ill will, and ignorance are added ditthi, views, vicikiccha, uncertainty, bhava, tanha, the desire to be, and mana, the tendency to conceit. Although we'll talk about these a little bit more, but that's not a perfect translation by any means. In the Majjhima Nikaya, it's explained how this works in terms of the dependent origination. There is the section of the Paticca Samuppada that because of sense organs existing, there is contact, and because of contact, there is feeling, and because of feeling, there is craving. And what happens is that when we contact something with the eye, ear, nose, tongue, etc., then automatically that arouses a feeling of either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And at that point, these feelings can trigger the anusaya and raise them from their dormant state, and they'll invade the mind. And for a pleasant feeling, if one grasps at it, relishes it, attaches oneself to it, to the pleasure, then that arouses the anusaya of sensual desire. And if one has an unpleasant feeling, a painful feeling in the body or mind, a feeling of physical pain or a feeling of sadness, and if one reacts to that with aversion and repulsion, this arouses the anusaya of patigga, ill will or aversion. And perhaps the most subtle is the case of a neutral feeling, which is actually a great deal of our experience. Things are mostly just kind of neutral, with a neutral feeling, then there can be aroused the anusia of ignorance. There's an indifference and not clearly seeing. Then this is the root of ignorance. So these then manifest at that level in the mind, and they can then mature into the next stage, which is upadana, or clinging, or more literally fuel for becoming, when they become an obsession in the mind, a dominant feature in the mind, and that can lead to becoming, or the manifesting out in action of these tendencies. So the way to not do that is, first of all, a clear seeing, particularly clear seeing of the feelings, that is Vedanusati, being conscious and aware of the feeling that arises in the mind, and not following that feeling, not allowing it to dominate the mind and take on an importance. And the key aspect of this clear seeing is seeing the not self nature in the whole process. It's not me, not mine, to see the emptiness. A sense impression is just a sense impression. It's not anyone doing the sensing. And the feeling is just a feeling. It's not I am feeling happy, I am feeling sad. It's just sadness or happiness. The other anusias that are sometimes included in a more expanded list are really two pairs, Ditthi and Vicikiccha. Ditthi is view, and here it particularly refers to the self-view. If one identifies with, sees as me or mine, the sense impression or the feeling or the craving, then this comes from view. The view there is a self. There is a self to feel the feeling. There's a self to desire or to be repulsed, rather than seeing it as an impersonal and ultimately empty, void process, playing out of cause and effect. One personalizes and identifies it with a self-view, then one falls into trouble, and that anusia is an underlying tendency in the mind, the view of self. Vicikiccha is uncertainty, or the wavering of mind, or doubt. It's the mind that's unsure, that is there's a certain aspect to this of having a craving for certainty. It's often translated as doubt. That's not bad in most contexts, but the word doubt in English is maybe not quite the same, because there's a kind of an open-mindedness that we might call doubt in English. That's not Vicikiccha. That's actually beneficial, to not fall into dogmatism and false certainty. They have an open mind. But Vicikiccha is not like that. It's not an open mind. It's a wavering mind. The open mind says, I don't know, I want to find out. Let's see. The mind with the Vicikiccha is grasping at some answer. It's unhappy with wavering, but it's unable to find certainty. It's a lack of faith and confidence. Now, these two states, Diti and Wicikitcha, are underlying tendencies up to the point of stream entry. They're eliminated by stream entry, which is the initial glimpsing of the unconditioned. So that purifies the view and it eradicates uncertainty. So those are underlying tendencies only up to that point. The next pair are actually much deeper and they're only overcome by the Arahant. And that is Bhava, Tanha, and Mana. Bhava, Tanha is the desire or the will to exist. So this is deeper than sense desire. Sense desire at our state of being as humans, sense desire is the noisiest, it's the most obvious, it causes the most immediate trouble, but it's not the deepest, it's not the most fundamental. Even if sense desire is made quiescent, there still can arise underlying it this will to be, desire to exist, bhava tanha. And this exists even up to the third stage of awakening. So it's a deeply rooted tendency. The tendency to conceit, mana, I'm just using the common translation here, is a deeper, more subtle form of self-view. The form of self-view that manifests as a ditthi is relatively superficial relative to this one. Ditthi exists mostly at the cognitive level. This is said to exist at the level of sanya, perception. Mana is the way of perceiving of self and other. And it said there are three ways this manifests in the outward level. One is the perception that I am better than you, I am greater, I am superior to you. The second way is I am inferior to you, I am lesser than you. And the third way is I am your equal. And all three of these are errors of the mind manifesting out of mana, the I am conceit. There's another list that's sometimes used that's almost synonymous with the anusyas. There are 3 or 7 anusyas, and there are 3 or 4 asawas. Asawas is a word that's very difficult to translate. There's been different attempts. A literal translation from the roots would be outflow, and you'll sometimes see that. Sometimes it's just left untranslated. Sometimes it's been translated as proclivities or biases, and various kinds of words like that. And it's an overlapping list with the Anusya, and it pretty much refers to the same sort of idea. The asawas are given as sense desire, ignorance, the desire to be, and sometimes added the fourth one is views. So in a way, it's an abbreviated list of the anusyas. With a samatha meditation, we don't overcome the anusyas, but we can make them quiescent, which is a beginning to subduing them. But in a metaphor that's been used often, they're like grass seeds in the ground. If you throw a flat stone or a piece of wood on the ground, then the grass won't grow. But then if you remove it, then the seeds will still come up again. So you haven't eradicated it, but you've made it quiescent. You've stopped it from manifesting in the mind. So when we do samatha meditation and develop samadhi and approach and enter jhana, the anusyas are not present at that time as manifest problems in the mind. And we can have some relief from them. This is one reason why the Buddha said that jhana has the taste of nibbana. It's not nibbana, but has the taste of nibbana, because you're experiencing a mind that's free of the manifestations of the anusya. But the ultimate goal is to eliminate or eradicate the anusya. It's like instead of throwing a rock on the ground, you get a trowel and you dig out the roots. And that's done with vipassana, clear seeing. In whatever form you do it, the idea is to clearly see the process. You first make the process conscious, and that allows you to begin to disengage from it. That goes through a series of stages. The critical ones at the ending are yatabhutananadasana, nibbida, viraga, nirodha, vimutti. Yatabhutananadasana is the knowledge and vision of things as they are, which is clear seeing, which is the practice of vipassana, clearly seeing the process of the mind. And that's only done with equanimity. As long as the mind is reactive to phenomena that are passing, it won't be able to see them clearly. It'll be clouded, and the anusyas will invade the mind. But with clear seeing and this sharp kind of equanimity that's called tatra majjhatata, precision knowing, clearly seeing without reaction what's going on in the mind, then this understanding, this wisdom grows. The process is seen, and it's seen in an impersonal way. Not me, not mine. It's not me doing it. It's mind and an object. And that allows the arising in the mind of nibbida. This is one of those words that's a real bugger to translate. There's been all kinds of different attempts. I think the best I've seen is disenchantment. Nibbida is the turning away of the mind from the process, kind of a disengagement, seeing this process of an object and taking the object and desire for the object and dissatisfaction with the object, seeing that process going on and on and on. If that's seen clearly, then a sort of inner weariness with it arises. And with the arising of nibbida, there's a beginning of a turning away from the process of samsara. So some translators, particularly older ones, used to translate nibbida as revulsion. And that has, I think, a wrong connotation, but to see where they're coming from with it, instead of an engagement and a desire for playing in the process, there's a turning away from it. And that leads to viraga, which is dispassion, which is a very literal and correct translation. Viraga is the stage after nibbida, that the passion for continuing to play this samsara game dissipates. As one has seen it clearly and begin to become disenchanted or disengaged, then the driving energy diminishes. And this is viraga, dispassion. And the process still continues for some time. It's like if you're driving your car and you put it in neutral but you don't hit the brake, it'll continue to roll just by inertia for some time, but it'll slow and slow and slow. So this passion, you're not feeding any more energy into the system, but it still kind of runs down on its accumulated karma. Then eventually it stops, and that's nirodha. Nirodha is cessation. The process of samsara, of taking an object, becoming dissatisfied with the object, moving on to the next object, that process stops. Then the mind not doing that, it allows the mind to experience the unconditioned. The only thing that keeps us from experiencing the unconditioned is our engagement with the conditioned, which is driven by the anusayas. And the experience of the unconditioned is vimutti, liberation. This is nibbana, which is essentially not doing samsara. So it's best to think of samsara definitely not as a place, or even really as a state, but it's an action. It's something we do. It's something we choose moment by moment. And it's so ingrained of a habit, something we've been doing every moment through the life, through billions of lifetimes, that it seems like that's the whole of possibility, the only possibility. But it's not. So to recap the essential point here, in the place of practice is to notice that tendency of the mind upon experiencing a sense object and the subsequent feeling to open up the gates, the floodway, and allow the latent tendencies to manifest either as desire or rejection, aversion, or as dullness and ignorance. And this is said to be in the Paticca Samuppada, this is the key link, the link from feeling to craving. This is where we can make that choice not to go on that route. And we can break away from the cycle at that point. And that's only done with a clear mindfulness and this precision seeing and noticing of what's happening. And making an especial effort to not identify with, not see a self in that process. So that's a few words on the anusia.